No one in the crowded diner noticed the trembling girl crawl under the wrestler's table, until her whispered plea froze the entire room. "Please, don't let him find me." Seconds later, the door slammed open. Her stepdad stormed in with men who didn't look like family. They looked like hunters. And when the wrestlers realized what the girl was hiding, the whole diner turned into a battlefield of truth. Before I continue, let me know in the comments. Have you subscribed to the channel or not? And also tell me which city and country you are watching from, so that I can thank you personally. It was 9 p.m. A thin drizzle tapped against the windows of the old Route 17 diner, sinking the lonely highway stop into a hollow, uneasy quiet. The flickering neon sign outside buzzed like a warning. Inside, only a handful of customers sat scattered, truckers, night shift workers, and then the group no one dared look at directly. 6 massive, intimidating wrestlers. They occupied the largest corner booth, jackets over broad shoulders, tattoos crawling down their arms, boots heavy enough to shake the floorboards when they moved. Their faces were tired but alert, the kind of alertness forged by years of fights, training, pain, and survival. Even the waitress, experienced as she was, approached them cautiously. Outside the diner, in the dim, wet glow of the parking lot, stood a 12-year-old girl named Ellie Turner. Her hair was soaked, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her breathing uneven, quick, terrified. She wasn't looking at the road. She wasn't waiting for a ride. She was staring inside the diner, eyes locked on the wrestler's booth, like she'd already marked them as her last possible chance. Then, out of nowhere, a black SUV screeched to a stop on the highway. Its headlights sliced across Ellie's face. She froze. The SUV door swung open, and a tall, sharply dressed man stepped out. Gregory Fields, her stepfather, not the father type, not even close, a wealthy political figure armed with power, money, and a darkness Ellie knew too well. Ellie took one trembling breath and ran toward the diner. Her shoes slapped the wet pavement, slipping once, but she didn't stop. She yanked open the diner door, the bell jingling violently. Only one person noticed. Mason Cole, leader of the wrestlers, 6'5", a man known in the wrestling world for being unbreakable, mentally and physically. Ellie didn't go to him. She didn't beg aloud. She didn't scream. She dropped to her knees and crawled under his table. Her breath hitched. Her hands shook uncontrollably. Her voice was barely more than a shiver. "But please, don't let him find me. He'll hurt me." Mason's brow furrowed. He lowered his head and looked beneath the table, meeting the wide, terrified eyes of a child who knew far too much fear for her age. "Who?" he whispered. Ellie pointed toward the window. He followed me. He's here." Mason turned slightly, catching a glimpse of the black SUV outside. Gregory Fields was talking to 2 men, broad, stern, and not the kind of men who searched for missing children like loving parents. They looked more like enforcers, hunters. One wrestler muttered, "This doesn't look right." Another whispered, "A kid running into a diner at night? Something's wrong." Mason's jaw tightened. Forget her age. Look at her fear. Then he slid a napkin dispenser aside, giving Ellie more space as she curled deeper under the table. And then, the diner door opened. Gregory Fields stepped in, rain dripping from his coat, face flushed with fury. "My daughter is here," he announced loudly. "She ran inside. I need her brought to me. Now!" The entire diner fell silent. The waitress backed away. The trucker in the corner sank into his seat. No one made eye contact, except the wrestlers. Under the table, Ellie grabbed the toe of Mason's boot, trembling violently. Please, don't say anything. He'll take me. He'll take me back. Mason placed a palm on the table, steady and firm, a sign to his crew. Well, Mason murmured, lying would be easy. Keeping silent would be easier. He leaned forward slightly. But letting a scared kid go back to whoever she ran from, that's not something we do. The air shifted. A silent current of tension rolled through the table, a storm gathering behind still bodies. Gregory scanned the room, his gaze landing on the wrestler's booth. Suspicion sparked in his eyes, but he had no idea, none, that the girl he was hunting was inches from Mason Cole's boots, or that the men at that table were seconds away from changing the night, and the entire town's story. Forever. Gregory Fields stood in the center of Route 17 diner like a man who believed the world answered to him. His soaked coat dripped onto the checkerboard floor, but his expensive shoes remained perfectly polished. His gaze swept across the room, cold and calculating. "My daughter is here," he repeated, louder this time. "She came inside. I want her now." No one responded. Truckers looked down at their plates. The waitress pretended to rearrange napkins. Even the cook peeked from behind the swinging kitchen door, then vanished again. Everyone felt the danger, but only one booth was ready to do something about it. At the wrestler's table, Mason Cole leaned back slightly, arms folded. His crew, 5 men just as massive, just as gritty, watched the scene with a predator's silence. Under the table, Ellie's trembling was so strong Mason could feel it through his boots. Gregory's eyes landed on the wrestlers. He hesitated, not out of fear, out of arrogance. He forced a smile, the kind politicians use during debates. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, "sorry for the disturbance. I'm just looking for my daughter. She's 12, brown hair, wearing a blue jacket. She ran away from home and I—" "Why?" It was Mason's voice, calm, deep, cutting. Gregory blinked. "Excuse me?" Mason tilted his head slightly. "You said she ran away. Kids don't run unless they're scared of something. Or someone." Gregory's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern." Another wrestler, Tommy Briggs, leaned forward. "It is now." Gregory's polite mask slipped for half a second, a flash of something sharp, dangerous, real, before he forced a smile again. "Look, gentlemen, I'm sure you're all big, strong, capable men, but this is a family matter." Mason rested his arms on the table. "Funny. I've seen family matters like you before." Ellie's tiny hand clutched his boot harder. Gregory took a step closer. "You're implying something?" Mason didn't blink. "I'm asking, what did you do that made a 12-year-old run through the rain at night begging strangers for safety?" A muscle twitched in Gregory's cheek. The waitress, standing near the counter, quietly locked the front door, pretending it was due to the weather. But Mason noticed. So did Gregory. Gregory's voice grew harder. "You're interfering in something you know nothing about. She's confused, emotional. She's been acting out. Now, if you saw her, tell me. Otherwise, step aside." He reached into his pocket. Slowly. Every wrestler tensed. Tommy Briggs whispered, "If he pulls anything stupid." Mason lifted a hand, signaling, "Not yet." Gregory pulled out a photo. Ellie was in it, smiling, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "She's my daughter," Gregory said, shaking the photo for emphasis. "I have custody, I have legal authority, and I will have her back." Mason stared at the picture, unreadable. Then he said quietly, "Kids smile for cameras even when they're hurting, especially when they're hurting." Gregory's facade cracked again. He stepped closer to the booth, lowering his voice so only they could hear. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. Mason leaned in too, voice low but lethal. Then tell me. Gregory's tone shifted. Darker. Colder. I own half this county. I bankroll campaigns. Police chiefs answer my calls. Judges owe me favors. If you're hiding her, I'll bury you in lawsuits and charges so deep you drown in them. Mason's men stiffened, but he didn't move. Under the table, Ellie whispered, "He's lying. He's lying. He hurts people." Mason heard her, felt her shaking. He made a decision. "Gregory," Mason said, using the man's name carefully, "I don't trust you." Gregory smirked. "You don't need to trust me." Mason's eyes hardened. "But she trusts me." Gregory froze. "What?" Mason stood up, slow, deliberate, towering over him. "She came to us for safety, so until we know she's not in danger, she stays right where she is." Gregory's voice cracked with rage. "You have no right." Tommy Briggs stood too. "So make us move." The diner went dead silent. Gregory looked around, desperate for someone to back him. But everyone's eyes were on the wrestlers. Even the cook peeked out again, this time not hiding. Gregory's men outside pounded on the SUV doors, waiting for a signal. But Gregory didn't give it. He couldn't. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't the biggest man in the room, and he wasn't the strongest. Ellie's shallow breaths slowed under the table. She sensed something shift, something protectively powerful. Mason leaned forward, voice low and final. "You're not taking her tonight." Gregory backed up a step. Just one. And that was the moment the entire diner understood. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Gregory Fields stepped back from the wrestlers' table, but the fury in his eyes didn't fade. It sharpened. He adjusted his coat, forced the anger off his face, and replaced it with that politician's smile he'd perfected over the years. "I'll be back," he said quietly, "to handle this properly." He walked out of the diner, and the door slammed hard enough to rattle the salt shakers. The wrestlers didn't move until his SUV pulled away from the parking lot. Only then did Mason kneel and lift the tablecloth. Ellie was still curled tight, arms wrapped around her legs, cheeks wet with tears that had dried and reappeared again. She looked like she was bracing for punishment, even though safety was inches away. "Ellie," Mason said softly, "you can come out now. He's gone." She shook her head immediately. "No. No, he's not. He never leaves. He always comes back." Her words hit the wrestlers harder than a punch. Mason extended a hand. She stared at it for several seconds, like she didn't know what a safe gesture looked like. Finally, she slipped her tiny hand into his massive one, and he gently pulled her out. She stood beside him, trembling, drenched, terrified. The moment she was in the open, another wrestler, Darius King, knelt to eye level. "Kid," he said, his voice rough but kind, "did he hurt you? Is that why you ran?" Ellie flinched. She hesitated. Her lips parted. Then she whispered, "He hurts everyone." The wrestlers exchanged looks, hard looks. Darius asked, "Has he hurt you?" Ellie didn't answer with words. She simply pushed her jacket sleeve up. A bruise, deep, ugly purple-black, wrapped around her wrist like a man's grip. Fresh, the air left every wrestler's chest at once. Tommy Briggs clenched the edge of the table. "That son of a—" Mason held up a hand, forcing the crew to stay focused. "Ellie," he said gently, "did you come here because you knew we were wrestlers?" She shook her head quickly. "I didn't know anything. I saw the lights. I saw people. I saw safety." Then she said something that made Mason's stomach flip. "And I heard him say, if he found me, he'd make sure no one ever listened to me again." Mason felt heat rise in his chest. Not anger, but rage. Controlled, focused, deadly quiet. Before he could respond, the waitress hurried over. "Honey," she said to Ellie, "do you want water or something warm?" Ellie nodded weakly. Mason gently placed his jacket around her shoulders. It drowned her completely, but warmth spread instantly. As the waitress walked away, Tommy leaned over. "Boss, something's off. The guy didn't panic that she was missing. He didn't ask if she was hurt, didn't ask if she was scared. He just demanded control." Mason nodded slowly. He's not worried about her safety. He's worried about what she might say. Another wrestler, Ryan Hale, frowned. "What could a 12-year-old girl say that scares a millionaire?" Ellie swallowed, voice trembling. "He does things. He makes people disappear, and he tells me, if I ever talk, I'll disappear too." Dead silence. Outside, headlights flashed, a car turning around. Then another. Then another. Darius peered through the blinds. Mason, we got company." Mason joined him. 3 black SUVs parked across the road, engines rumbling, windows tinted, no one getting out yet. Gregory hadn't left. He'd returned with more men. Mason exhaled through his nose. "He's coming back with backup. He's not calling the police. These men aren't cops." Tommy muttered, "They look like private security." Ryan added, "Not the legal kind." Ellie grabbed Mason's arm, panicking. "No, please! He'll take me! He'll take me and hurt me again! Please don't let him—" Mason knelt in front of her, gripping her shoulders. Not hard, but firm enough to anchor her. "Ellie, look at me." Her eyes darted up. "You're not going anywhere with him. Not while we're here. Not tonight. Not ever." She burst into tears and collapsed against him. Mason held her, jaw clenched, eyes burning with a promise he fully intended to keep. Darius whispered, "We gotta get her out of here before they try something." Mason nodded. "We will." He stood, lifting Ellie into his arms, light as a feather compared to the weight he'd carried in his life. "Boys," Mason said, voice low and commanding, "we're about to walk into a storm, but we walk together." The wrestlers stood, towering, ready, united. Outside, the SUV doors opened. Gregory Fields stepped out. No smile this time, just cold, furious intent. And behind the glass of the diner, 6 wrestlers stood with a trembling girl and the kind of resolve no man could buy or break. The battle for Ellie had officially begun. The moment Mason stepped outside with Ellie in his arms, the cold night air hit them like a wall. Rain had returned, thin, sharp droplets tapping on jackets, pavement, and the metal bodies of the 3 black SUVs lined across the diner parking lot. Gregory Fields stood in front of them now. No more fake smiles, no more politician charm. Just a man burning with rage, flanked by 6 suited men who looked like they were hired for muscle, not security. Mason's crew stepped out behind him, forming a protective arc around Ellie. 6 wrestlers, each built like a brick wall, yet moving with silent precision. Gregory's voice cut through the rain. "Give me the girl." Mason didn't blink. "No." Gregory took one slow step forward. "You think you're heroes in some movie? You have no idea what you're involved in." Tommy Briggs stepped between them. "We know enough. A bruised kid ran from you like her life depended on it." Gregory gave a cold laugh. "You think that bruise came from me? Kids lie. They manipulate. She's troubled, unstable." Ellie suddenly trembled harder in Mason's arms. "Liar," she whispered. "He's lying." Mason lowered her to the ground, but kept one hand on her shoulder. Gregory spread his arms dramatically. "I'm her father." "Stepfather," Darius corrected sharply. "Big difference." Gregory's mask cracked. "She's my responsibility." "No," Mason said, voice calm but deadly. "She's your victim." Gregory's face twisted. "She has no proof. You have no proof. When the police arrive—" "We already called them," Ryan Hale interrupted. Gregory's head snapped toward him. What? Ryan held up his phone. Emergency services, domestic endangerment, child welfare risk. They're on their way. For the first time, real fear flickered behind Gregory's eyes. His men stepped forward aggressively. Mason raised a hand, stopping his own crew. We're not looking for a fight, he said. We're protecting a child. If you want to act like a father, prove you care about her safety instead of your image. Gregory exhaled sharply, his voice lowering. You don't understand what she stole. Mason's brow furrowed. Stole? Gregory hesitated, then nodded to one of his men. The man pulled out a printed photo of a USB drive. We need the drive she took. It belongs to my foundation. Ellie's body stiffened, panic replacing fear. Mason turned slowly to her. Ellie, what's on that drive? Her eyes filled instantly. I didn't steal it, she said, voice barely audible. I found it on his desk, and it had videos. What kind of videos? Tommy asked. Ellie shook her head rapidly, the memory too heavy to speak. Kids, she whispered. Other kids. Talking, crying, telling someone what he did. I didn't know what to do, so I ran. The wrestlers froze. The rain seemed to stop. The night seemed to hold its breath. Mason stepped between Ellie and Gregory fully now. You're finished, he said quietly. Gregory roared. Those recordings are fake. She made them up. Darius scoffed. You think anyone's buying that? You left a digital trail a mile long. Gregory's voice broke into a snarl. You're going to regret this. Mason barely moved. No. You are. Sirens wailed in the distance. Gregory's men tensed, ready to bolt. But Gregory didn't run. Instead, he pointed at Ellie and screamed, She is my daughter! I will destroy anyone who tries to take her from me! Ellie stumbled back, and Mason caught her immediately. No one's taking her, he said, voice low, except the people who will protect her. Police cruisers skidded into the lot. Blue and red lights flashed across wet pavement and furious faces. Officers jumped out. One aimed a flashlight at Gregory. Sir, step back. Another reached for Ellie, voice gentle. Sweetheart, you're safe now. You're protected. Gregory exploded, lunging forward. But he didn't get far. Tommy seized his arm mid-air, twisted him around, and pinned him to the hood of his own SUV without breaking a sweat. Gregory howled. You can't do this! You have no right— Tommy leaned down, voice cold. I have the right to protect a kid, and you've got the right to remain silent. Police took over, cuffing Gregory and his men. The SUV's engines were shut off one by one. Ellie collapsed against Mason, sobbing uncontrollably. It's over, he whispered. No one will hurt you again. But as she cried, she pulled something from her pocket, a small silver USB drive. Please, she said, voice shaking, don't let anyone hide what's on here. Mason looked at the wrestlers. They looked back, determined, united. We won't, he promised. Tonight wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something explosive. The flashing red and blue lights painted the diner walls long after Gregory Fields had been dragged into a patrol car, screaming promises of revenge into the stormy night. The officers shut the door, muffling his voice, and the SUV pulled away like a broken throne being carried to its final resting place. Ellie stood between Mason and Darius, wrapped in Mason's oversized wrestling jacket. She looked small, fragile, but for the first time, she wasn't trembling. Police officers moved around her gently. Sweetheart, we'll need to take your statement, one said. But Ellie clutched the USB drive tighter. I want them with me, she whispered, pointing at the wrestlers. The officer looked at Mason. You're her guardians tonight? Mason glanced at his crew. No one needed to speak. They all nodded. Yeah, Mason said softly. We are. The officer didn't argue. He simply stepped aside and let the girl walk with the 6 giants who had become her shield. The investigation begins. Inside the diner, officers set up a temporary evidence table. A female detective, Detective Ramirez, knelt in front of Ellie with kindness in her eyes. Do you know what's on that drive? Ellie nodded slowly. It's kids, talking about him, talking about what he did. Nobody believed them, but they recorded it. Detective Ramirez's expression hardened, not toward Ellie, but toward the man now in custody. Ellie, you just brought down a monster. She plugged the USB drive into her laptop. The wrestlers stood behind Ellie like guardians carved from stone. Audio files popped up, video thumbnails, dates, names. Detective Ramirez clicked the first file. A teenage boy's voice filled the diner. He said if I talked, he'd hurt my mom. He made me come to his house alone. The detective shut her eyes briefly and exhaled. This is enough to bury him for life. Ellie's grip loosened, the weight finally lifting. People will believe them now? She asked quietly. Ramirez placed a hand on her shoulder. They will, and they'll believe you too. Ellie's lips trembled, not in fear, but relief. Gregory's empire collapses within hours. News vans crowded the diner parking lot. Reporter. Breaking news. Prominent businessman and political influencer Gregory Fields has been arrested on charges of child endangerment, abuse, and evidence tampering. Another reporter. Authorities confirm that a group of professional wrestlers protected the victim, a 12-year-old girl, until officials arrived. The wrestlers kept Ellie inside the diner, away from the cameras. Mason stood guard at the door, arms crossed. Ryan muttered, "Look at them. They just want a headline, not the truth." Darius sighed. Yeah. But tonight the right story wins. Ellie looked up at them. Are they going to take me away now? Back to him? Or somewhere else? Mason knelt again, eyes level with hers. No one's taking you anywhere unsafe. You're with us. You're family now. Ellie blinked, confused. Family? Tommy smiled softly. Family is the people who show up when you're scared, not the ones who scare you. Her lower lip quivered as she whispered, I never had that before. Now you do, Mason replied. A social worker eventually arrived, kind, older, knowledgeable, but when she saw Ellie holding Mason's arm like a lifeline, she paused. Normally she'd come with me, the woman said gently, but given the situation, the department has authorized temporary protective placement with a trusted adult. Ellie's eyes widened with hope. Mason raised an eyebrow. Who counts as trusted? The social worker smiled. Well, you 6 did just take on a corrupt millionaire and win. Ellie wrapped her arms around Mason's chest in a sudden, desperate hug. Please, can I stay with you? Just for tonight? Mason's throat tightened. He wasn't used to soft moments. He wasn't used to being needed. Yeah, he said quietly, hugging her back. For tonight, for as long as you need. The wrestlers exchanged looks, a silent vow. Not one of them would let anything happen to her. Not now, not ever. As the night ended and the storm cleared, Mason carried Ellie out of the diner. The neon sign buzzed overhead, and the smell of wet asphalt filled the air. 6 wrestlers walked beside him. Behind them, police sealed off Gregory's empire. Ahead of them, headlights cut through the darkness, a convoy of men who had spent their lives fighting in rings. Now fighting for a child. Ellie rested her head on Mason's shoulder and whispered, Thank you for finding me. Mason looked down at her. No, he said softly. You found us. And with that, they walked into a future where she was finally safe. Because she had an army now, an army of wrestlers. Some heroes wear badges, some wear capes. But sometimes, heroes walk into a diner wearing wrestling boots. A terrified girl hid under a table because the world failed to protect her. But 6 strangers didn't fail her. They listened, they stood up, they fought back, and they proved that family isn't blood. It's the people who protect you when everyone else looks away. If this story moved you, remember this. There are children out there hiding from monsters every single day. Be the person who sees them. Be the person who stands between them and the dark. Because one act of courage can change a life forever. Like this video if you believe no child should ever face danger alone. Subscribe for more emotional storytelling and real-life inspired narratives. Comment, protect the innocent, to show support for vulnerable kids everywhere. Share this story. It might encourage someone to step up for a child in need. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next powerful story.